Hello folks, the Y Guy here again, and welcome to part 2 of the two-part series that I'm doing of called The Y Guy, what is it called anyway? The Y Guy, Hard Evidence for and Against Hell. Now, before I get started, please look me up on Facebook under the Y Guy group and or my avatar, Jonathan Jones. Thumbs up, thumbs down. You know how it goes. Subscribe. Please be polite if you're going to disagree with me. There we go. Now we've got that. I would encourage you to view part 1 because this video won't make as much sense. I do get into some fine detail. It's roughly 13-14 minutes long. But this one won't be quite that long. But I try to explain why I approach it the way I'm going to approach it here on this video. Okay, and a little bit of my background, novice background in law. I would you will understand in courtroom proceedings. I explain all of that on the first video. And so I'm going to reiterate just a couple of things on this one so that it will make sense. The two main ingredients that any good investigator, I almost became a peace officer as well, the whole spiel, you'll understand if you see video 1. But the main thing that a good investigator or an interrogator or a district attorney or attorney would do is the main rule is keep your eyes and your ears open to an inconsistency or a lack of consistency when it comes to someone's testimony or their, in an interrogation room. That's why interrogators have you repeat it over and over again to make sure that it stays consistent. And then if there's a lack of consistency in a courtroom, somebody's not telling the truth. It's as simple as that. And whether it's for or against, if they're your witness or someone else's witness, the job of a DA is to get them to break down their testimony of using consistency. It's just how it works, folks. All right. And the second thing that's always used is by a DA or attorney or even interrogator is to try to discredit the testimony of an opposing testimony. All right. Now I'm going to use that one more than the first one on this video. All right, and you'll understand here in a moment. Okay. Now this one, the first video, I hit on the three main evidence that's used that I used to use all the time was it's in the Bible, or people who have gone to hell, that testimony of people who say they've been there. And then the other one was, well, look on the news. You can see that there's a justice that's needed for the wrongs of mankind. All right, those are the three main testimonies that I would give as a Christian. I would share with people who I wanted to convince of hell. Though that was my hard evidence, so to speak. I already dealt with the first one, with the Bible. It's in the Bible. That's part 1. Now here in part 2, I'm going to deal with people who claim they've gone to hell and also for the justice issue. All right? So let's start right now. Christian testimony number 2 says that, talks about people who have gone to hell. Now, I would cross-examine this evidence. And the reason I would say that these testimonies would never be admissible as evidence in any kind of court is for these 6 reasons. Number 1, all right, the testimony is subjective. It's a subjective belief. It's influenced by personal feelings, personal opinions. Also, it's based on supposition of theory. It's hypothesis, postulation, assumption. I had to write all this stuff down. Postulation, assumption, and it's presumption. It's based on all of that. That's why it wouldn't be admissible. And that's only 1 out of 6. Here's number 2. They will always bring, I would bring as a DA or an attorney to try to discredit this testimony, I would bring forth that there's a question of the mental competency of this person and how active their imaginations just might be, That's not reaching, folks. It just isn't. And I know this might offend those of you who say you've gone there. Alrighty, and I'll cover that in a moment here. Number 3, there's no collaborating eyewitnesses to your journey. Number 4, even though you may believe as an individual that you're convinced that your testimony is true, there is a precedence all right, in history, and it's still going on today. There's a precedence of cult practices, of brainwashing that uses fear for indoctrination into any kind of a belief system. So this is more than likely the case for this testimony. Number 5, there is a contradiction in this kind of a testimony, because they all claim that there's a common denominator. They all claim that there's no escape from hell, yet they're here telling us about it. So you see? And the answer that you will hear from these people is that, will God allow them to return as a warning to the rest of humanity that there's no escape? You see, it's a circular argument, which is not evidence. It can never be construed as evidence. Number 6, there's a consideration of many book deals and, speaking engagements, and there's an alluring motivation here, folks. It just is. There's a motivation for promoting hell. Now, this is how an attorney would discredit this testimony, all right? Now, let's go with the last one. This will be a much shorter video than the first one. Christian testimony number 3, we'll call it that. There's a need for justice for the wrongs of mankind, and hell is that need. It fulfills that need, all right? And I used to say the same thing, and I used to believe the same thing. Well, I'm going to cross-examine this this way. This testimony is purely opinionative, and you have to be honest about that, because it is. It is based on conjecture, an individual's conjecture, of course. It's totally hypothetically based, and it would never be allowed allowed as evidence, because it's all the above what I just said. Now, my argument to the court would be this: if hell is justice, what is the just cause that comes from it? What is a just cause that comes out of hell? If it's justice, you got to look up justice, folks. If you don't know it, and I don't mean to be sounding like I'm talking down to anyone. I'm really not. Don't intend to do that. Now, think about this. If any court anywhere would pass a judgment that burn them alive for the crime of jaywalking, how do you think that would go over, folks? I mean, all civilized society they'd be outraged. I mean, if you think we got problems now and riots in the streets now of injustice against, a certain minority group in your particular city by the police or what have you, and what we've seen take place in the news, just imagine doing something like that. And yet, get this, okay? This is irony, or just amazing. Christianity sanctions people being burned alive for the crime of unbelief. It's almost laughable. And I used to believe it. And I feel so foolish right now. I'm not saying you're a fool for believing it, but I feel foolish that I just didn't examine it. I just didn't go that step further with this and say why, and ask myself, why do I believe what I believe, and search for those answers. First thing, searching requires prayer, trusting God, not trusting what you've been taught. Have a willingness to put aside everything you've been taught, and a willingness to judge what you believe. Does what you believe promote the love of God? His very character? Does it promote His character, which is love? Does it cause you to trust God more or less? I'm sorry, folks, but believing in hell certainly didn't cause me to trust God. I could vainly say, well, yeah, I trust Him for me. That's pompous. That's self-righteousness. If you can't trust Him for all of creation, then you're really not trusting Him. And I'll be bold to say that as dogma. Okay? And then last but not least, does it bring out in you love, joy, peace, patience, meekness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, the fruit of the Spirit? Does it actually endorse that and bring that out in you? If it doesn't, it's not of God, because that's the fruit of His Spirit. All right? So in closing, folks, I'm still left wondering, where is the real evidence for hell? Thank you for viewing.